Hello, and welcome to Talking Llama with Connor. So, I've set up this channel as there are four things in my life that make me who I am: musical theatre, Disney, Game of Thrones, and, of course, Survivor. Being someone who's from Wales in the United Kingdom, Survivor isn't really readily available around here. We have had 3 seasons of the UK show over the years, but none of those have been positively received. And when you ask most people from the UK if they've seen, or even heard for that matter, of Survivor, the answer is generally no. Now, I discovered Survivor quite recently in the grand scheme of things in 2021. I was trying to get home from university one day via coach, and that would be an actual coach, not Benjamin Coach Wade, our Lord and Saviour. And my coach was late to its changeover in London, meaning I couldn't get another one until the next morning. This left me then stranded in London for 8 hours, bored and alone. Woe is me. So as I was scrolling on TikTok, I saw a clip of the Survivor auction from Worlds Apart, and it really piqued my interest. I've never particularly been into reality TV. I've dabbled here and there, but something about Survivor just seemed almost grander to me, and more of a fleshed out narrative. So I decided I would give it a watch. The only version of the show that I could find was Australian Survivor on Amazon Prime. And by the time I was then getting onto my coach a few hours later, I'd seen the first 5 episodes of the rebooted season, and I was utterly hooked. I was just completely enamoured by how it wasn't just a programme about surviving on an island, but a true masterclass, really, in social politics and strategic manoeuvring. Within the next few months, I became completely obsessed with everything related to Australian Survivor, and I decided to watch the US version of the show, because I felt if I'd watched Australian Survivor, I should definitely watch the original. And this just deepened my obsession and turned me into a true student of the game. Since then, I have seen every season of the US and Australian editions of Survivor multiple times, and spend more of my free time than I'd like to admit, delving into the history and secrets of Survivor, and just trying to generally expand my knowledge of the game. I've dabbled with all English language Survivors, but Australian and US really hold a special place in my heart, though I do like Survivor South Africa as well. So I've decided to make this channel to interact with many other people who are fans of the show, and I wanted to follow in the footsteps of the people that I look up to and listen to every day, like Rob Has a Podcast, with Peridium, Once Upon an Island, Idled Out, The Moranium Review, and loads of others, who have me watching their content every hour of every day, essentially. I'd also like to hopefully introduce many other people from the UK to the show. I do have lots of plans for the future of this channel, including casting videos, rankings, and a season retrospective starting from season 1 of the US show with my father, who is more of a casual viewer than me, but he also loves it and has had to watch it because of me a lot more than he probably would like to. And he can give a different perspective as someone who loves watching the program but isn't a true superfan. To take this further as well, I have some other guests lined up who've never seen the program before, who will be watching some seasons with me and giving their takes from an outsider's perspective. But to start today, I'm going to be doing a season ranking of seasons 1 to 40 of the US show. I'll be doing a new era ranking of 41 to 50 after the release of season 50, but for now, we're going to stick with the original seasons. Well, I say original, up to 40. And with all of that out of the way, here is my US seasons 1 to 40 ranking. So, coming in at number 40, what I see as the worst season of Survivor US, and probably the worst season of Survivor ever. This is probably not going to shock many of you. I've got Survivor Thailand. Now, I'll get this out of the way. We all know about the Ted and Gandia situation being something that absolutely should not have been allowed and would not be allowed nowadays on the program. And I think that starts in episode 3. I think that's episode 3 where all that happens, I believe. And from there onwards, the season just has this sour note, and it's like a stain on the rest of the season. I understand why some people quite like Brian Heidick. He plays an incredible game, he's very impressive strategically, but I just can't get behind him. I find him really slimy, almost, very sleazy, and I know lots of people are of the same opinion, but I can't get behind this sort of used car salesman type. And if you're in a final 2 with Clay, and you're arguably the less likable person, then I think you definitely have a problem on your hands. Now, I do like aspects of the season. Obviously, the whole attack zone scene is very famous, where Jeff keeps having to tell them that they have to be in the attack zone to, I guess, attack, and they keep not doing that, with Rob Zabachnik essentially choking Clay out. It is funny. And I do love Rob Zabachnik's evolution in the season, actually. But that's something that I can't really hold that highly, because he's gone by the merge. And then Xian, again, is someone that's likable. Obviously comes back for All Stars. But again, she's gone by the time of the real merge. She obviously makes the fake merge, but... And again, the fake merge isn't something that really interests me that much. I get what they were going for, but I don't think it really works out very well. So, yeah, there's not much I really have to talk about with Thailand. It falls here at the bottom of my ranking. Then, edging it out ever so slightly, we have Survivor Island of the Idols. This is again at the bottom of the list for very similar reasons. We all know about the situation with He Who Shall Not Be Named. And although I think it has had positive ramifications since, changing the way that Survivor casts the show and deals with issues like this, it should not have been allowed to happen on the season, or at least happen for as long as it did on the season. I think it's really, really upsetting to watch, and everything relating to Dan is just terrible TV. Now, I don't think that Island of the Idols is the worst season outside of that. I think there's a lot to like. I've always especially liked Dean. I know lots of people don't. Tommy, to me, is arguably the most boring winner of all time. But again, he's a very impressive winner. I think his game is fantastic. I think he held a lot of power without really being seen as the top of the power structure for the whole time. And Lauren Beck, I think, is someone else who is very interesting. I do think there are lots of great characters on this season. Nora's fantastic. Eileen is fantastic. I just think that everything to do with the Dan situation really, really ruins the season for me. Obviously, again, this season is famous for having Rob and Sandra on the season as the eponymous idols, I guess. Island of the Idols is essentially an island of Rob and Sandra. And it is cool to see them back. I love all their bits where they're watching the tribals from their little sneaky hut. But I don't really know if they needed to be there. I'm never going to say no to some Boston Rob or some Sandra Diaz Twine, but I don't think they really add that much to the season as a whole. And lots of their lessons that they're meant to be teaching don't really add any weight. So I've got Survivor Island of the Idols at 39. And then at 38, I've got a season that, compared to the last two, is very positive. But it's just so boring to me. And I know lots of people don't agree with this, but I have Survivor Heroes vs. Healers vs. Hustlers. I know that lots of people see this as quite an underrated season. I just don't get it. My main issue with this cast is that there aren't that many people on the cast that I find particularly interesting. I think that Ben is one of the worst winners ever. Not really a controversial opinion. And all of his idol finds, I wasn't cheering for him, but more groaning. Obviously, we all have a problem with the forced fire making at Final Four not being told to them at all until Chrissy finds out. Chrissy, on the other hand, fantastic character. Love her, can't wait for her to come back. I feel like it's inevitable. But no one else on the season really grabbed my attention. Lots of people like Devon. I don't mind Devon, but I don't think he's the most interesting TV. You've got, like, Joe Mena. Interesting. He's sort of trying to do the Tony Vlacho shtick, but not very well. You've got Ryan there, who's basically like rip-off Cochrane. And Dr. Mike, I guess, is there. But there's not really loads that sticks in my memory about Heroes vs. Healers vs. Hustlers. So for that reason, it lands at 38. Now, this is probably going to be a bit more of a controversial one. Because loads of people love this season. But for me, it's definitely not the worst season of Survivor. As I've said, I don't think there's a season of Survivor that I don't enjoy. But this one has never hooked me at all. And that is Season 4, Marquesas. Now, there are lots of obviously great things about Marquesas. It's the introduction of Boston Rob. And although at the time of All Stars he was seen as a bit of a random returnee, if you rewatch Marquesas, he's basically the star of the show until the merge. He's got some fantastic moments. His whole Godfather spiel is incredible. When he's flirting with Kathy Vavrick O'Brien in the merge summit, I guess. That's fantastic stuff. But he doesn't last the whole season. I think the main draw of the season is Sean Rector, who is just a star on this season. His confessionals are gold, everything he says is incredible, and I can't believe that he hasn't come back yet. Sean Rector for Survivor 50, I say. I do love Kathy, but I don't think she's the most interesting character. I think she's a good player. I think she's likable. I don't know if she's the best of the season by any stretch of the imagination. Now, I understand the importance of this season, having Vecepia as the first black winner, and I like Vecepia, but I can't say she's one of my favourite winners in the history of the game. Again, though, someone that I would be very interested to see on a return. I think she had a lot of knowledge of the game, and she's someone that could surprise us if she ever came back. But, alas, she hasn't ever come back. Now, I do love all the stuff with the Road to 4 and John Carroll. I think that's all fantastic stuff. But, again, it sort of ends too quickly for my liking, and out of that group, John Carroll's the only one that I find interesting. There is some ickiness here as well, with Boston Rob essentially calling out and making fun of John Carroll for being gay, which is difficult to watch on a rewatch. But it's a more positive season than the ones, well, than a couple of the ones we've had before this. I also think that this season is a product of it not being shot where it was meant to be, and due to 9/11. So they had to make lots of changes to the season, and Marquesas is a private island that they're shooting on. And I think you can sort of tell. Some of the challenges are a bit bizarre. The look of the season isn't particularly pleasing. And there's just been nothing in this season that has really made me that enthralled. I do, however, really like the Hunter blindside. I think that's an important moment for the show. It's a great moment for Boston Rob. Sort of sets up his trajectory throughout his Survivor career. And it's the first time we saw this like golden boy the like Colby figure of the season get taken out and not just make it to the end and win. And I think that's very interesting. Another important thing I obviously have to note is the rock draw. Now, I essentially think rock draws are the best thing in Survivor. I think whenever rocks happens, it creates incredible moments. Bar here. Now, I don't hate it, but I think the fact that this wasn't something that was like previously known by the contestants, before this, tie votes were worked out on who had the most votes before this, I think it makes it difficult to watch, as the players didn't know what they were playing for, essentially. But it still makes a great TV moment, and it's great to see Pascal go home in a fun fashion. So yes, we have Survivor Marquesas landing at number 37. At number 36, I have Survivor the Amazon. My issue with Survivor the Amazon is that the post-merge is phenomenal. The pre-merge, I think, is one of the most boring bits of any Survivor season ever. Essentially, nothing happens. I also have a problem with the season, as Jenna Maraska, to me, is not the most deserving winner ever. Now, I probably would have voted for Jenna in the final two. But after having a season that is so Rob Cesternino focused, it's hard to watch it and want anyone else to win other than Rob. I think this is one of those seasons, like a Samoa, where if you love the one central character, this being Rob Cesternino, then you're going to like this season. But otherwise, is not really much for you. I think it says a lot when one of the iconic moments is just Heidi and Jenna stripping for chocolate and peanut butter. I mean, what's going on there? But no, this is a season that I've always found mildly entertaining. But outside of Rob, there's not much for me. And that's why I can't feel like I can rank Survivor the Amazon any higher than this. Next up, we've got Survivor Fiji. Now, Fiji is another weird one. I think Fiji is generally a pretty terrible season. But Earl is such a fantastic winner. Maybe not the best TV presence, but definitely far from the worst we've ever had on Survivor. But he plays such a good game, and if he didn't have that one rogue vote, I mean, he should have been the first ever perfect winner of the game. I think Earl brings a lot to the season. I love the scene where he's dancing. He's got some moves. And also, it's obviously the Yao-Man show as well. And Yao-Man's a phenomenal character in this season. He's got so many great moments. The car deal with Dreams is so iconic. He made the first ever fake idol. First person to play an idol, like a modern idol, correctly. I think it's quite easy, to forget just how much Yao-Man did to change the future of Survivor. He's so important to the history of the show. And he was a massive figure at the time, but I feel like he's someone who's kind of forgotten about nowadays. The one thing that puts Fiji above other seasons for me, and I know it's just a singular scene, is the final tribal council. I think it is hilarious. Lissy's speech, where she's asking Dreams really condescendingly how many zeros are in a million, and he gets it right, and she's shocked, flabbergasted, and then talks about the water shoes, worst shoes she's ever seen in her life, on Cassandra. It's just great stuff. The Alex Angarita speech is also incredible. That's a hilarious one. I watched that a lot. My favourite one is Boo's speech, when he's talking to Dreams about, as a Christian man, I want to hear your Christian answer. It's just great stuff. I think it's one of my favourite scenes in Survivor history, actually. Obviously, Snakes and Bats is iconic, but this is my favourite final tribal in the history of Survivor. One thing that does knock it down for me is I love the rise and fall of the Four Horsemen. I think that's great. But Rocky and some of the others almost bullying of Anthony is a bit hard to watch sometimes. And Anthony's not the best character, but I do have a soft spot for him. And Rocky, I despise. There's been a long time since I've hated someone as much as Rocky. But every time he's on screen, he winds me up to no end. But anyway, that's it for Survivor Fiji. And next up we have Survivor Worlds Apart. White collar versus blue collar versus no collar. This is a season that, yes, has some ickiness with the Will and Shireen stuff, but I think if you look at it through the lens of being like a modern day Gabon, you can get a lot of pleasure from it. I think it's got so many hilarious moments. I'm not afraid to say that I think Dan Foley is a great TV character. Yes, he's got many terrible, outdated views, but the show leans into that. It knows that. It's not presenting him as a hero. It's letting you know that they know that this guy's a bit of an idiot. And it's great to watch. Shireen, I think, is a hilarious presence. Again, it's one of those seasons where if you don't like Mike Holloway, you're not going to like it. But luckily, I do like him. And I think all the America stuff on the tribe is hilarious. Still shocked that Haley Ford came back and Sierra Dawn Thomas, but here we are. Joe, I think, is probably his most likeable on this appearance. Cambodia is probably his best run, but I think this is the season where I enjoy him the most. He's not a massive personality, but he's very likeable, and obviously his challenge prowess made him win the hearts of many. And a bit of a weird one, but Rodney Lavoie Jr., one of my favourite Survivor characters of all time. I think he's an underrated strategist, and everything he says is just pure gold. That whole scene about his birthday, where he's expecting them all to take him on a reward for his birthday, and they don't, and he's really annoyed about it, scumbags, is one of my favourite scenes ever. I think it's hilarious. Dan Foley going around in a diaper, hilarious. I really like Worlds Apart. It's not a season I'd rush back to rewatch very often, but when I do, I always have a good time with it. Now, my next spot might be a tad controversial. This has been a season that has become like almost a cult classic for Survivor fans, and I think so many people call it underrated that it's actually become massively overrated. And that is Survivor Vanuatu, Islands of Fire. Now, from here on, I like all of these seasons a lot. And there's nothing wrong with Vanuatu. It's got some fantastic characters on the female side with Eliza, Amy, Scout, Twyla, Julie Berry to some extent. It's got some really interesting moments. I think Amy's a great character on this season. And obviously the Chris Doherty of it all is fantastic. That final tribal is so impressive, the way he manipulates everyone there. This underdog story of the women taking out all the men and then the final man left standing, winning it all, I think is great stuff. He's a god in the confessional booth, and I love him. But the season, I think, can be a bit slow at points. I think especially the whole pre-merge. I couldn't really tell you any of the names of the pre-merge boots of that season. The first episode's got some interesting stuff with the men versus women, introduction to the people of Vanuatu. I think that's quite fun, where they have to climb up the tree sort of thing. But generally, Vanuatu just doesn't have enough to put it in top tier contention for me. And that's why it lands here at 33. And for similar reasons, 32 is Guatemala, the Maya Empire. Another season that I think is really good. I really enjoy it. I think it's got a great, underrated cast. But is it a top tier season? No. I think the story of Stephanie LaGrossa here is fascinating. Obviously, she had this massive hero underdog story on Palau, and seeing the complete flip of that, seeing her here as someone who was loved by the fans, loved by the other players in the game, and at the offset, and seen as this almost god within the game, and the power going to her head and her becoming this massive villain over the season, I think is great stuff. I think Rafe Judkins is a great player. I think he's massively underrated in the Survivor canon as a phenomenal one-time player, someone that I think should have won the season. Danny Boatwright, obviously we know now that she was keeping a lot of her strategy from the cameras because she wanted to keep everything to herself and play her own game and not have the producers twisting things or letting things out. But because of all of that, her keeping the strategy hidden from the cameras, she does become a bit of a lackluster character. I did actually really enjoy her on her return in Winners at War, even though it's just a short stint. I thought that it was really interesting to see her back after so many years, and I thought she was quite a fun character, and the paranoia of her I thought was great. On this season, not so much. What I do love about this season is the setting. I think it's one of the most glorious, gorgeous places that Survivor's ever filmed. I think it's so good. I do, I do think that scene where they cook the sacred chicken is iconic, and the scene where they have to make the big walk to the camp at the start of the program is great TV. I must say that I've got a secret soft spot for Bobby John. I think Bobby John is great fun, especially on this season. And his rivalry with Jamie, who may be my favourite character of the season, is hilarious. Jamie's such a fascinating character, where he starts off like a bit of a buffoon, but likeable and quite powerful. And then his paranoia takes over so much that he's just becomes this brash, arrogant player that they vote out. And he has this hatred towards Bobby John, where they take it out on each other a lot in the challenges, almost fight at one point. And then he joins the jury with him and they become best friends. I think it's great to see. I love Jamie on this season. And obviously, you can forget Judd. Hope you all get eaten by a bunch of crocodiles or whatever. Scumbags. Great stuff. Judd, top tier character. Now, as positive as I am about Guatemala, it's just not the best season. It's very enjoyable. I just don't think it's incredible. But the next one might be a surprise to many people who probably had it lower than this. But at 31, I do have Survivor One World. Now, I know the Colton stuff is not great at all. He is, to put it frankly, a massive racist. But outside of the Colton stuff, I don't agree with the idea that this season is boring. I think that lots of the players are boring, but so boring that it makes them interesting. For example, Leaf does nothing, complete idiot in the game, but this lunacy is what makes him such a compelling character to me. Him being this idiot who knows nothing about the game, I find really fascinating. And that whole scene where he's upset that he didn't get his letter from home, great stuff. Kim Spradlin, I think, is actually the main issue with this season. And I'm sure other people agree with this. We know that she's one of the best strategists in the history of the game, one of the best players in the history of the game. And it's one of the most impressive wins ever. But it just means that everyone else gets shafted so much to basically fall on their swords for Kim. Other than Troyzan. And say what you will about Troyzan and his subsequent returns, I think Troyzan is an absolute joy on this season. All the This Is My Island stuff, his blow-ups at Kim, it's just wonderful stuff. And the season gets knocked up a lot just for having Troyzan there. And even though we didn't have the one world twist for that long, I thought it was really interesting and I'd like to see how it would work on a return. So at 31, I have Survivor One World. Now, starting off our top 30, we have Survivor the Australian Outback. This is one that has fans quite divided. At the time, it was obviously the biggest Survivor season ever. It probably is still the biggest Survivor season ever. In terms of viewership, it definitely is. But I think lots of us can agree that over time, it's become a bit stale. And it's a great season. It's got so many iconic characters that stem from it. You've got Tina, you've got Colby, you've got Jerry, you've got Amber, who obviously goes on to win the game. But outside of that, I think it's a bit of a boring season. And I think that also stems from it being the longest season. Saying that, it does have some of the most iconic moments in Survivor history. Despite what we know about him now, Scoopin falling into the fire is still a moment that will be etched into all of our brains forever. Hell of a moment. As Mark Burnett said, that was going to be the reason that they stayed on air forever. And so far, that is true. I think that this is a great season that okay, before I go into this, I think some seasons are about why this person won. And some seasons are about why this person lost. And I think this season does a really good job of showcasing that for Colby, why he lost the game. And I think it, again, was a real twist in the history of Survivor to have this golden boy focus of the show be the person to lose at the end, and have the first ever female winner in Tina, who was a very deserving winner as well at that. I also think it's interesting how they changed their editing from the first season, where there was a lot of focus on Richard Hatch. This season didn't have as much focus on Tina. I also think that so many of the moments that have become so synonymous with Survivor started here. Things like the auction, things like the flood of the camp, and Jeff coming and taking their tarp in exchange for some more rice. And that's a great moment. I also think that, again, despite what he may have done nowadays, Jeff Varner is a great presence on this season. Kimmy Kappenberg, great fun on this season. Alicia, great fun on this season. There is a lot to like, but it's also a very long, slow process. That finale is one of the most boring finales, if not the most boring finale, ever. They spend so much time just painting idols and things to throw them off a cliff. Not the most interesting stuff. But I still love Australian Outback. I still think it's iconic, full of lots of nostalgia. It's here at 30. At 29, I've got a season that many people probably would have ranked higher, and that is Survivor Palau. Now, Survivor Palau is a season that is incredible if you don't know what's going to happen. The first time you see it, it's such a good season of seeing this whole tribe get pagonged, and they have to absorb Stephanie LaGrossa into the merged tribe, and then watching Tom dominate from here on out. It's a great story. The underdog story of Stephanie LaGrossa is fantastic. Watching Bobby John come up just short. Tom's winning game is incredible. Although I do have problems with the way he essentially bullies Ian at the end. Ian is someone else who I think is one of the best final jurors ever. I think if Ian had managed to get rid of Tom, he would have won in impressive fashion. And that final immunity challenge is obviously iconic. But I think once you know what's going to happen in this season, it becomes a bit of a stale watch. You know that people are going to go out from the same tribe every single episode, and then you're just going to watch Tom steamroll his way to the end, which is impressive, but not particularly fun watching. And for a similar reason, I have, at my 28th spot, Redemption Island. Another season that if you don't know what's going to happen, it's incredible watching Rob's journey watching him play with a bunch of people that have no idea what the game of Survivor is, and him basically herding this bunch of goats to the end. Incredible. He plays such a good game on this season, and I know lots of people knock him and say that he couldn't have done this with a regular cast, but I don't think it matters. He played with the cast he had, and he played in very impressive fashion. But if you've seen this season before, or you don't like Boston Rob, there's nothing here for you. Well, I say that. There is something here for me, but not for most people. I adore Philip Shepherd. I think he's one of the best casting decisions that Survivor's ever made. I think when they found Philip, they struck gold. I would love to see Philip on any season of the program. Stealth R Us is incredible. I love him. I think he's hilarious. I think the feather he gets from his ancestors is hilarious. His tattoos are great. Francesca is obviously phenomenal. That whole premiere episode is actually great. It says a lot that Francesca made such an impact that she came back again. Now, would I have invited her back again? No, but I could see where they were going with it. I think Andrea is someone who becomes a great presence in later seasons. This season, not her best. All the Zapatera tribe I find quite boring. But it is great seeing Russell's downfall again, and seeing him cry at the Redemption Island duel is great TV. And then when Ralph says that he has found the idol, and then he gets told, "Oh, don't say that to Russell," and he goes, I tricked you. Great stuff, hilarious stuff. And I also think watching the journey of Matt Elrod, or should I say Wyatt Nash, is really interesting as well. Seeing this guy get voted out near the start of the game, winning every duel, coming back into the game to get voted out again, is really interesting stuff. But it can be a lot of just watching Rob work this tribe. And don't get me wrong, the buddy system's incredible. Him throwing that idol clue into the volcano, incredible. But unless you like watching one player dominate, this season isn't for you. This is maybe one of my most controversial picks. But next, I do have Survivor China. Now, I know people adore China, and I love it too. I think all these seasons are fab. But it's never been a favourite of mine, which is weird because the cast has so many people that I adore. I think James is incredible. I love Amanda. I love Courtney Yates. Todd, fantastic winner, best final tribal council performance of all time. But there's just something about it that I can't completely connect to. I don't know what it is, because there are so many iconic moments. I think the whole Dave Cruz arc is great. I think James going home with two idols in his pocket is obviously so iconic. The whole location is gorgeous. But there is just something about Survivor China that just doesn't put it into the upper echelon for me. And that's fine. But it's still a great season. It's produced lots of great returnees. The Jamie idol blunder's great. There are lots of things to enjoy. And I think if you wanted to watch a season, this would be a good one to start on for lots of people. It's just not a top tier season for me. But also controversially, having this season above China, I've now got Survivor Nicaragua. Which, as I said before about Worlds Apart, I enjoy watching the seasons that are just complete calamity. I do enjoy watching a season that isn't completely purely strategic. It's got some idiots on there trying to play Survivor not very well. I enjoy that. I think Naonka is a star. Even though her and Purple Kelly quit, I think her time on the show is fantastic. I think she's hilarious. Her rivalry with Kelly Bruno is, a bit weird and a little bit tough to gauge, but hilarious stuff. I think all the Jimmy Johnson stuff is great. Jimmy T telling him not to sit him out is fantastic. I think there are lots of great underrated characters on this season. Brenda, fantastic on this season. Lots of people thought she was going to be the second coming of Parvati. Obviously, we didn't get that, but Her time there showed a lot of potential. And Marty, fantastic, fantastic TV. I think it's an absolute crime that Marty hasn't been brought back. And say what you will about Fabio, I think he's a hilarious winner, and I understand why he won. I think his run at the end is really impressive. I think he's really good socially, and he's just an enjoyable presence to have on TV. So yes, we've got Survivor Nicaragua there. Now, at 25? Yes, was I saying the last ones were in the 30s? If I was, I apologise. At 25, we have got Survivor South Pacific. Now, I'll say it fast, the cult stuff is terrible. It's difficult to watch, it's bad. Brandon Hantz has lots of terrible moments, the Delilah stuff, his outbursts. There's a lot to not like here. But then there is a lot of stuff that is hilarious in this season. Even if Coach is at his most villainous here and his most real, I can't help but adore Coach. And I think he should have won this season. Although I do love Sophie and her Winners at War showing was incredible. I think Coach is a masterclass in strategy this season. The way he manages to get all of his whole tribe wrapped around his finger. Considering that when he came into the game, they were all disappointed with having Coach and not Ozzy. The control he manages having is so impressive. I also think the Cochran stuff is fantastic. I'm a big fan of Cochran. I think his flip is exactly what the program needed to keep interesting. And the Ozzy storyline is maybe my favourite Ozzy season of the bunch. I am an unapologetic Ozzy stan. And I think this story of him getting asked to be voted out, winning all these duels, coming back into the game, getting voted out again, winning more duels, coming back into the game, only to be voted out a third time, is fascinating. And he's such a good character on this season. His first season, you can sort of see his arrogance, but he's being more presented to us as a hero. His second season, he becomes more like the Ozzy we know nowadays. But this season, he's on full display. He's almost a joke in this season. But, my God, I love him. You've also got some great moments from, like, Stacey Powell, what's his name? What was his birth name? That bit, fantastic. I just like a lot of South Pacific. Jim Rice. There's a lot in this season I really like. And although there's a lot I don't like as well, I can't put it lower than this on my list. Talking of ickiness, we've got Cook Islands next at 24. Forget the fact that it was a race war season, which obviously not at all okay. This is a really strong season. It's one of those seasons that really relies on the big names. You've got Parvati, who does become a big name, but isn't really in this season. Sort of the same with Candice. But you're really relying on Yule, Ozzy, and Penna. And I love all three of those players. Especially Penna. I think Penna is one of the best casting finds they've ever found, I guess. I think he's gold on this season. I think him flipping around is fantastic. The mutiny is great. Yule is such an impressive, dominating force on this season. And the first time I saw it, I wasn't sure how I felt about Yule. I wasn't sure if he was just a bit cocky, a bit full of himself. I've decided on subsequent rewatches and watching Winners at War that he's not at all, he just is that good. But his game is so impressive that when he flips Penna to his side after the merge, he's got such like a mob boss quality about him, but in such a kind, gentle way. Ozzy is obviously so incredible in the challenges this season. It's almost unbelievable to watch him move like a dolphin in that water. I do love a bit of Ozzy, if I haven't said previously. But Penna, I think, is also treated very unfairly on this season. I think if he played the way he played in this season on a later season, he'd be respected a lot more for it. Anyway, I love Cook Islands. And I know it's not for everyone, and I know it focuses a lot on the lead characters, but those lead characters mean enough to me that I can enjoy it a lot. And also all the side characters of like Nate and Cowboy, I love. Anyway, at number 23, we have Blood vs. Water. Blood vs. Water is a great season. It's such a solid season. I think it's incredible that they got such a random group of returnees, a bunch of partners or family members of these returnees that could have just been total duds and turned out such a great season. I think Hayden Moss, bringing someone from Big Brother in, was a genius stroke. The way he and Sierra pull off that rock move, I mean mostly Hayden, is fantastic. The rock draw is one of my favourite moments in all of Survivor. Tyson is a joy this season. He's so impressive. And I love these players who are heroic, but are almost anti-heroes. There is something villainous about Tyson. I mean, he was on the villain tribe and he was just villains, obviously. But he's so goddamn likeable. You can't help but root for him. He's so funny. I love a bit of Tyson. He's great. Jervis winds me up a bit on this season, as does Monica Culpepper a little bit. But, oh well. Who cares? Sierra is fantastic. Did you know she voted out her mom? I didn't. Fantastic stuff. I love having Sierra East in there. Every time she returns as well, I think she always brings something to the season. Even on Game Changers. Always a big proponent of Sierra Easton. I think it's lovely to have Tina back after so many years, and having her be the returnee from the from Redemption Island is great. I also think that it's got so many great newbies in the form of Brad Culpepper, I think is a fantastic player. I love having Candace on this season. I think this is her best showing of all of them, even though she's hardly there. I think she's great. It's hilarious that Rupert gives himself up at the start of the season, and then that's basically the end of his story over all of his seasons. I think that's hilarious. I really like Blood vs. Water. I think there's a lot to like here. But controversially, I prefer, at 22, Survivor Game Changers. Game Changers is a weird one. The post-merge is not that strong. It's not that strong at all. The Varna situation, we don't need to talk about, but that's really tough to watch. But that pre-merge, I think, is one of the best runs of episodes in Survivor history. And yes, we lose all the big names, but what we get from them when they're there is incredible. I think this is the most entertaining Sandra is ever in Survivor. The goat hunting is incredible. Sugargate, fantastic. JT is hilarious. I love him seeing him take the Colby directory of turning into this old curmudgeon. I love it. Fantastic stuff. JT always holds a special place in my heart. The Malcolm tribal, when he's voted out, the first live tribal in Survivor history. Unbelievable. Tony Vlachos, his 2-episode, well, I guess 1 episode, but 2-parter. His stint, you get everything you'd want from Tony within an hour and a half. It's just incredible stuff. I love it. Now, the post-merge, we are left with lots of the duds. But I do think that also allows lots of them to become heroes in their own right and become legends of the game in their own right. Sarah Lucina, you hardly see in the pre-merge. But from the merge on, she plays one of the most impressive winning games in Survivor history. And comes back and wins at War to have another fantastic game. I think Sarah is really not underrated in this season as a player, but underrated as a character. I think her whole cop to villain story is fantastic. I think the scene where Sari tries to take her extra vote and says, it's non-transferable. Fantastic stuff. The Michaela blindside there is great. Talking about Michaela, when she flips her hair and drinks the water out of the teacup when JT's voted out, that's hilarious. I love that too. Aussie, I was a bit disappointed by on this season, but we've had enough Aussie from other seasons to know what Aussie's like. I do think as well, though, that no matter what you say about advantage getting, and it's a travesty that we lost Sari again and she didn't get to win, but what a great, important TV moment. The fact, as long as this is something that doesn't happen again, and currently it hasn't, I'm very okay with it. As a one time thing, I think it's a great moment of TV. If this was happening all the time, and we were too overloaded with advantages, which, yes, we are in the new era, very much so, but we haven't happened to have this happen yet, then I'd have a problem with it. But as a one time thing, I think it's such a fascinating vote. So, Game Changers lands here. And as again one of my most controversial picks, I do have at 21 Survivor Ghost Island. Now, I can hear you all calling me an idiot. I can imagine the comments now. Go with me here. Ghost Island, again, is a series that focuses on a few main characters, and that's it. The problem is, those main characters are incredible. Dominic Abate, I mean, he may as well be a winner. He lost by one vote, which was someone else who shouldn't have been able to cast a vote. Dominic's game on this season is unbelievable. He's such a showman. When he plays that fake idol, or doesn't play, pretends to play that fake idol and votes out Seabass, it's so impressive. That whole finale episode is great TV. I think the control he had was unbelievable. And Wendell also. His social game is another level. He's so good at challenges. That challenge where he forgets to call it is hilarious. And then the next one where he goes, Jeff Probst, I got it. That's great stuff. I think those two are one of the best duos in Survivor history. And I know I'm not the first person to say that. Now, other people's problem comes with the rest of the cast. I personally love the rest of the cast. Laurel, yes, has a lot of problems. Why she didn't flip on Wendell or Dominic, God knows. But I'm not upset about it because I love Wendell and Dominic and didn't want either of them to go home. So it doesn't upset me. Donathan, I think, is such a rare casting find. I think it's great how he goes from this little innocent southern boy to this like calamity of a player who's just doing random things left and right. Has enough agency, but not as much as he thinks. I think he's really fascinating. Michael Yerger may not be the most interesting personality, but I think he plays a really impressive game, especially considering his age. And I'm surprised he hasn't come back. I thought he'd be like the new era's golden boy. But I know we haven't had a chance really to have him back yet, but I feel like his time has probably passed, which is a bit upsetting. Jacob Derwin obviously has a fantastic run over those couple of episodes at the start. He may have taken too much screen time from everyone else, but I'll allow it because I love Jacob Derwin. And how can we carry on without talking about Chris Noble? I think the Chris Noble boot episode is one of the best episodes in Survivor history. I think it is hilarious. Him saying he's too suave, saying Dom and Wendell are pitching him BS. Everything that comes out of that man's mouth is gold. The Ponderosa rap, when he gets to Ponderosa, is incredible. The way he throws those balls in that one episode, you know what I mean. And he's like the Terminator. The way he pulls the whole group, bar Dom and Wendell, to the well to have a chat at the merge about voting out Dom and Wendell. He's just gold. And I doubt we'll ever see him again, which is really upsetting. But I would love to see the return of Chris Noble. And now, on to my top 20. So starting off my top 20, I have Panama Exile Island. This is a joy of a season. This is another one of those train wreck seasons that I just can't get enough of in Survivor. I think this is one of my favourite newbie casts of all time. You get Sari from this season. Who doesn't love Sari? What a top tier character. You get Terry Dietz, who has a weird trajectory in the Survivor Pantheon. In this season, he's presented as like this almost final boss for all of the other players to overcome. And he's almost seen as this cocky thing in this season. And then he comes back in Cambodia for his second chance and is such an understated presence. He's so kind, he's so gentle, and has to leave on such upsetting terms that it's really interesting to go back and see how he's presented in this season. But you can't deny how impressive he was in challenges at the time. He was essentially Tom Westman without winning. He was such a force to be reckoned with in this season. And I think his interactions with Dan Barry are hilarious, who was not an astronaut before you ask. But the whole Kasaya tribe is really the important aspect of this season. You get Shane Powers, who is just a 10 out of 10 character. Every single thing that Shane does is fantastic. You take a man who's addicted to nicotine, take the nicotine away from him, put him on an island where he's got nothing, and see him fall to pieces. The scene where he says he's going to murder Courtney Merritt in her shitty little apartment brings a smile to my face every time. When he asks Sari to look at his balls because he's got a rash, hilarious. His thinking seat is hilarious. His fake BlackBerry. Everything this man does is gold. And I can't believe he wasn't voted back into second chances. I would have given him 20 votes if I could have. He's just a true legend to me for someone who's only played once and so long ago. I just can't overstate how much I love Shane Powers. You've got Danielle Di Lorenzo, who isn't the most interesting character, but is interesting. If she was on another season, she'd probably be one of the more interesting players. You get Aris, who is almost this straight man for the rest of the people in Kasaya, and even he is a bit obscene with all of his yoga stuff. But I think he's a worthy winner, Aris. Obviously, if Sari was there, it's her game, definitely, but well. I think Bruce is a great character, and I think Bobby is one of the most underrated pre-merge boots in the history of Survivor. This is one of those seasons that isn't that strategically advanced. I mean, Sari does pull off the 3-2-1, incredible move, changed the history of Survivor, but it's just so much fun to watch these ragtag hooligans somehow win out and make it to the end. It's great. I love Panama. Next, I've got a season that would be much higher if it wasn't for all the ickiness surrounding it. And that is Survivor All-Stars. We'll get it out of the way. The Sue Hawk situation is incredibly difficult to watch. Her shouting at Jeff, the way that Jeff doesn't take her seriously, the way that everyone else laughs at her, the way they sing Ding Dong the Witch is Dead, doesn't age well in the slightest. And neither does the Jenna Maraska scene, where she decides to go home to see her mother, who sadly died just after she got back. But outside of that, I can't help but love this season. I know people don't. I know people think that it's a season that loses lots of its great players at the start. I disagree. I mean, by the end, you have Boston Rob, unbelievable character on this season, one of the best single season showings for a player ever, who wasn't particularly an all-star at the time, although he was great in his first season. By the end of the season, it's undeniable to recognise his prowess in the game. Amber's so impressive in this game. She is really underrated with how much she does do strategically with Rob. And the fact that she was able to also keep those social connections open enough that she could win, I think is very impressive. Rupert is a joy, as always. The shelter that he builds, which is just a hole in the ground that gets flooded, is one of my favourite moments ever. And the season where Rob says, "You look after her and I'll look after you if you can. That one is just one of my favourite moments in Survivor history. I think it's fantastic. The whole Lex blindside. And then seeing the journey of Boston Rob getting all these people to turn on him, and then at the end having it all bite him in the butt at that final tribal with like "Don't be stupid, stupid" and all that. It's fantastic, and the hypocrisy of Lex as well when he's doing the same to everyone else, but he's so upset when it happens to him. I think it's just so interesting to have this first All-Star season and see the first way that the game plays out, having all of these previous connections from outside the game. I just love All-Stars. I'm a sucker for a season with people that I like from previous seasons on it. And this season gives me a lot of what I want. Richard Hatch walking around with a shark on his arm. Now it's a shame that Rob Cesternino goes home early, but he even gets some good lines in here and there where he says that Rob and Amber are going to do it. That's always something that stuck out to me as really funny. I just love All-Stars. I can't help it. I think it's a great season. I think Jenna Lewis goes up in my estimations a lot. I just really like it. I like seeing Ethan have this scrappy underdog season. Anyway, next, at number 18, we have got Millennials versus Gen X. Now, I did toy with having this season a bit higher, but my issue is a lot of the cast doesn't stand out to me. I think strategically this season is leaps and bounds above other seasons, and David Wright, to me, is a star on this season. His journey is unbelievable. Watching him go from someone who's scared of everything to a strategic powerhouse is so good. Seeing him make that fake idol to get Jay out. Jay, who again is so good on this season, is phenomenal. Seeing the rock draw between David's faction and Zeke's faction is so impressive. Zeke is a joy on this season. I just adore Millennials versus Gen X. There are just other seasons that I prefer. I think when Ken goes and tells everyone about Will's plan to test him, I think that's hilarious. I think Hannah Shapiro is really underrated. And that bond between Adam and Jay. Adam, who is actually one of my favourite winners in terms of personality, is just so emotionally heart-wrenching. That scene where they open up to each other about their mothers when they're on the hammock makes me cry every time I watch it. And this season just holds such emotional resonance that it's just impossible to not fall in love with this cast. There are a lot of duds on this cast, which is why I can't bring myself to put it any higher. But the people who make an impact really make an impact. Talking of duds on a season, I've got Survivor Samoa next. And I can hear loads of you saying, oh, that should be way lower. Survivor Samoa is incredible if you love Russell Hantz. And I don't care what people say, Russell Hantz is one of the best characters Survivor has ever produced. He is so impressive on this season. The way he finds idols. No one had ever done this before him, just finding them without clues. Multiple days on the trot. The episode where he gets rid of Eric Cardoza is incredible. I can't help but just be enamored with everything Russell does. And I also think the other characters on the season are also good. Natalie White, yes, should have had more to do considering she's the winner. But I think the moments she has are good. The moment where she kills the rat is fabulous. I think Dave Ball is hilarious. I think John Fincher is hilarious. Is anyone stoked on Pie? I think that's great. I think there are a lot of underrated characters on this season. Shambo is obviously the other big character outside of Russell. And she brings so much to this season. I really like Jason. Ben's a bit iffy. But just how much I love Russell on this season alone is enough to knock this season up by leaps and bounds. Okay, so here comes the really controversial one. And I don't want all of the Survivor fans to kill me on my first video. But at number 16, I do have, and I'm really sorry, Survivor Cagayan. Look, don't get me wrong, Survivor Cagayan is a truly exceptional season. It is. It's unbelievable. It's one of the best newbie casts of all time. I love it. There are just other seasons that I love more than Cagayan. The Tony of it all is truly remarkable. And I love how he was seen as this like unicorn winner who could never do it again and pulled it off on this season, but wouldn't be able to win on any other season. And then he came out and won again against winners. I think it's a really remarkable story. I think he is just pure TV gold. I think his Spy Bunker, or Spy Shack in this one even, Spy Bunker's next time, and then we obviously get the Spy Nest, is hilarious. I think him pawning the clue off to Jeremiah to get the target on his back is hilarious. I love his bag of tricks. I love that he pretends that his super idol can be played later than it can. The fact that he manages to get Wu to take him to the final tribal is great. That moment where Trish is shouting at him at final tribal, and he is asked if he would really swear on his parents' lives again for $1 million, and he says that he would. And he's asked if he regrets it, and he says no. It's just fantastic stuff. Obviously, Talking Llama is the inspiration for the name of my channel. I'm sure if you're on this channel, you've worked that out already. I doubt anyone listening to this wouldn't have known that. But if not, that's where that comes from when he talks to Chaos Cass. He's just a one of a kind player in this season that really changed how Survivor was played after. It was like if Russell Hantz had won Samoa. And I have nothing but respect for Tony. The whole Brains tribe, their whole calamity is unbelievable to watch. It's so funny seeing David Sampson at the start, choosing Garrett as the weakest player, seeing Garrett basically put everyone on house arrest, trying to essentially do buddy system to the max, but not being Boston Rob. It's hilarious. Jatia throwing the rice in the fire, hilarious. There are so many good moments in this season. I think the Merge Tribal is one of the best, if not the best, Merge Tribal in the history of Survivor. Where the way that LJ and Tony both play their idols incorrectly, but Cass flipped anyway, so it doesn't matter, and Sarah goes home after calling herself the president for an episode. There are so many moments in this season that are so iconic to Survivor fans and so memorable. There are just other seasons that I do prefer to it. And I love Spencer on this season, I do. But I've never seen him as a top tier Survivor player or character. I do think he's great. Is he a favourite of mine? Not particularly. I feel the same way about Tasha. I like Tasha on this season. I don't like her in Cambodia, spoiler. But, again, just not a favourite of mine. Bryce Isaiah, I love on all of his podcasts, but he doesn't do loads for me on the season. And I'd love to see him return. After listening to him talking since the show, I think he could do an amazing job on a return. I think he's got a great strategic mind. But I don't think we really got to see that on the season. But anyway, Survivor Cagayan is still a great season, and it lands here at 16 out of 40, which I think is pretty good. And it's a season that I would happily watch on any day of the month. At number 15, starting off a string of old school seasons, actually, we've got the season that started it all in Survivor Borneo. Now, Borneo may not be a perfect season, but I do think it's unbelievable how well this season has held up. It's got so many great moments still. Snakes and Rats, I think, is not only one of the most iconic Survivor moments, but TV moments of all time. It's hard to overstate how big of an impact this season had on America when it aired. The world was obsessed with Survivor, and you can see why. It was such a strong season. And the Richard Hatch of it all is unbelievable. He truly did change the game forever. Well, built the game, I would say. He didn't change it, it was season 1. But he was basically the blueprint for every other Survivor player after that. Now, I know he often gets credited with creating alliances. That wasn't just him, it was his whole alliance, and Stacey Stillman as well. But the way he played in thinking about it strategically, not just being there to make friends, being there to play a game and to win $1 million, really changed how people played from then on. They all wanted to be the Richard. And he still holds up as such a great TV personality. Even things like him going out and getting the fish for the tribe. People like Ozzy implemented that in the future. Him, obviously, running around naked hasn't held up as well anymore. But his relationship with Rudy, I think, is really the backbone of the series. I think that's the emotional core of it. And watching these two men from completely different backgrounds come together and form a close friendship is really remarkable to see for the time it was airing. Sue Hawk, again, is a great character on this season. Not a personal favourite of mine, but it's hard to argue with how big a presence she was here. Even Wigglesworth was like the first likeable underdog. And the whole Pagonging is fantastic. This tribe that were like full of America's sweethearts, just getting disintegrated one by one, is fascinating TV. I also have a soft spot in my heart for Sean Kenneth. His alphabet strategy, still incredible stuff. But it's not really a dud on this cast if you look at it. Colleen's great, Greg's great, Jenna's great, even Gretchen's great, Jervis is fab on this season. And I think it's just still, for the original season, such a fantastic season. And it's so interesting watching Jeff in the early seasons and how different he is nowadays and how far he's come as a host of the game. Seeing him take people on rewards on yachts and letting people use his credit card, so different from how he is nowadays, but so interesting to see this journey of him as well. So I've got Survivor Borneo at number 15. At number 14, I have Survivor Pearl Islands. Now, lots of people would probably say this is the best of the original 8 seasons. I've got one above it. You can work out what it is from what I haven't said yet. But Pearl Islands is so much fun. I think Krista saying that John is the biggest puss is fantastic. What a random moment to start on. But I think Krista's a really underrated character in the Survivor Pantheon. Obviously, it's the start of Sandra Diaz-Twine's journey, her first winning game. Almost a perfect game, weirdly. Lil is fascinating. And weirdly, I think the Outcast twist, which I'd usually be against, improves the season massively. I think having the return of Burton and Lil and having this flip to get rid of Andrew Savage really, really bolsters the season, in my opinion. And Rupert was such a breakout star. He may have had diminishing returns as he came back in terms of how interesting he is, but he was truly a star in this season. And it was a perfect season for him. He really took this pirate role to another level. The whole first episode where he's stealing the shoes and Sandra's talking to all the citizens there. All the like villagers. It's so interesting. It's such a great season. And then obviously the Johnny Fairplay of it all. What a fantastic character. Really the first big reality TV villain. That dead grandma lie, she died dude, is going to be something that's going to be remembered forever, I think. He was such a fantastic character in that season. The way he came to Tribal drunk on his first Tribal, his arguments with Rupert, his relationship with Burton, the way he played Lil. I think he's such a top tier character. Also, if you haven't listened to it, I'd really recommend listening to his podcast, Reality After Show. Obviously, after you finish listening to this. But a great season, a 10 out of 10 season, fantastic. And the only season I prefer of the old school seasons is one that isn't as highly revered, but really, really interests me, and that's Survivor Africa. Now, lots of what I like about Africa is just how unique it is. This location is unlike anything they've ever done. The fact that they're in this enclosed space, they can't really go off and have private conversations. You've got like lions walking around at night. It's unbelievable, really, that they managed to do this. And I love the cast. Big Tom is a joy. Ethan is like the first likable hero to win the game. I like the previous two winners, but you know what I mean. Lex is such a great anti-hero for the show. His whole paranoia and decline when he gets that vote from T-Bird that he thinks is from Kelly is so good. I think the relationship between Frank and Brandon is very interesting. And although it doesn't hold up very well, I think it's a real product of the time and is very interesting there. You got the fall of Silas in the pre-merge, which I think is great. And that whole older versus young alliance on Samburu at the start, I think is really, really interesting stuff to watch. I just love this season. I couldn't even pinpoint like a huge moment, really. It's just a season that makes me smile the whole way through and a cast that I really, really enjoy. T-Bird singing is a great moment. Fantastic moment. Everything with Clarence in the first episode with Clarence eating the food and then his underdog story. He's a really likable presence on that season. And yeah, it's just a season that I really have a lot of time for and feels like classic Survivor to me. Coming in at 12th on my list is a very popular season, and that would be Survivor Philippines. I love Survivor Philippines, and that is in large part due to my love of Jonathan Penner. I think Penner is one of the best characters in Survivor history. I think he is always going to bring a lot of joy whenever he's on a season. And I'd love to have a return of Penner on season 50. I'd love a Penner win at some point in Survivor. But it also comes from my love of Abby Maria. What an incredible character. And I know she's not everyone's cup of tea, but I would do anything to see Abby Maria on my screen again. She brings so much interest into the season. Her feud with RC is incredible. When she throws the coconut at Scoopin's head, she was doing everyone a favour. What a joy. She's just made for the TV. But I do have to say that I think the story at the start of the season of the Mat Singh tribe disappearing and being left with just Denise and Malcolm, who then make it all the way to the final four, both of them, with Denise obviously winning the game in a very impressive fashion, having gone to every tribal, and still making it through all of them and managing to win the game. I think it's such a good story, and watching Russell Swan as well, who was shown as this incredible, heroic leader in Samoa, and still playing the same archetype in this season, but it being seen as more of an annoying thing for his other castaways is really fascinating to watch as well. The story about him getting bullied as a child, I think, is always a great moment. Also, Zayn Knight, I think, is my favourite first boot in Survivor history. He makes such an impact in that one episode. I think it's a cast that's altogether fantastic. Malcolm obviously speaks for himself. What a fantastic character. I think he's got everything. He's a great personality. He's great socially. He's great strategically. He's great physically. He truly is a one-of-a-kind player. I think Lisa's really interesting. I think Penner, going back to Penner, I think his final tribal speech is hilarious. When he tells Scoopin that he hasn't got a single vote, in the game, and tonight his record might stay untarnished. I mean, he does end up getting a single vote to win for some reason, but it's still hilarious. When he says to Denise that she was a bitch, but she rode them all to the end like oxen. That bit's great. It's just a season that I really, really enjoy watching, and I think it only gets better on a rewatch. It's a fantastic time, and I think all the Jeff Kent stuff is great. That episode with Abby Maria saying that she's got an idol. Great. Great stuff. Saying about the idol, sorry. Anyway, next up we have just about not making it into my top 10. We have a very controversial pick in Survivor Caramoan Fans vs. Favourites 2. A hated season, but a season that I personally love. Now, this goes against lots of what I've said previously in this podcast, because I think the pre-merge is very, very dull. And it has all of the Brandon Hunt stuff, which is terrible. But I do think probably the best show of Jeff Probst as a host of the program. But that post-merge, I think, is unbelievably good. So good that it knocks it up to 11th on my list. The Three Amigos Tribal is incredible. Everything with Philip Shepherd, that confessional he's got where he's talking about Self or Us, and he's actually walking around introducing them all as a confessional, is just genius editing. It's so well done. All of the stuff with Cochrane becoming this challenge beast is fantastic. The Brenda stuff with her finding Dawn's teeth and then Dawn voting her out and her getting really upset about it. There's not a moment in that post-merge where I'm not just beaming cheek to cheek. I've always loved Corinne, and to see Corinne in full force is great. My main issue with this season is that it hasn't got the strongest cast of fans, and I know lots of people say that the favourites aren't great either, but I actually was quite pleased with lots of them. There are a couple that are duds, yes. I didn't need to see Francesca back on my screen. But generally, I think it's a very good cast of favourites. Especially having Eric Reichenbach back as a proponent of the last Fans vs. Favourite season. Having him as this figurehead of the theme is great. And even though he goes home in an upsetting fashion, it's nice just to have his presence. But the fans tribe is very lackluster. You obviously do have Sherry, who makes it all the way to the end. But who really cares about Sherry other than her final tribal performance? You do have Eddie Fox, who I guess is okay. He does get near to the end. But I love, love, love Reynolds. I think he's hilarious, his cocky nature. Everyone else, I could take or leave. I love Matt Bischoff, but that's mainly just because I listen to him doing podcasts post-show, not because he was great on the island. And Shamar's got some moments, but generally he doesn't do it for me. But this is a season that I do just have a special place in my heart for, possibly because I am a massive Cochrane fan. I'm very like Jeff Probst in my opinions on many characters. But yeah, it's time for our top 10. And at 10, we've got another one that might surprise people. In San Juan del Sur. San Juan del Sur is a season that's probably gone up in people's estimations since the season because of the incredible returnees that it's created in Jeremy and Kelly Wentworth. I mean, it's also had Keith as a returnee, but rest in peace. But obviously he had a bigger season this season, and Natalie has a similar story as well. She had a big story arc on Winners at War, but this is obviously her winning season. But this is a cast of newbies where I genuinely don't think there is a dud there. I think it's a truly great cast. The rise and fall of Drew Christie will be analysed for the ages. John Rocker, I think, is hilarious when he tells Natalie that if she wasn't a woman, he'd hit her. Oh, okay. Okay, John. You've got the Twinnies obviously being incredible. I think Natalie Anderson's winning game here is one of, if not the best, in the history of Survivor to me. I think it's so impressive. When she says to Jacqueline, "You voted for who I told you to vote for, didn't you?" That's just a stroke of genius. Incredible stuff. Jeremy Collins is great on this season. It's a shame he goes so early. Josh and Reed, oh my god. Josh is such a strategic powerhouse in that first half. And then Reed, from the merge on, becomes such a big TV character. You don't understand how he wasn't before. His final tribal speech is obviously iconic, and his petty jury vote for Jacqueline will always be hilarious to me. But I love when he calls Baylor a brat. That's incredible. I love Alec Christie trying to flirt with Jacqueline. I think Jacqueline and John Mish are both great characters and very underrated. And I don't know how you can talk about this season without talking about Keith Nail, who was just such a breath of fresh air on this season. It's so rare that you see someone who isn't massively into the game, isn't a massive super fan, isn't the sort of person you'd expect to do really well, who absolutely dominates in challenges, is such a likable personality, and he's not a strategic mastermind. I say stick to the plan, but it's so lovely to see him on screen. He's such a likable presence, other than when he's spitting. And yeah, I just really like San Juan del Sur. It just makes me happy. So at 9, another season I have here for similar reasons, it just really, really appeals to me, is Survivor Go Wrong. Again, probably a bit high for lots of people, but generally liked by the fans. I think that scene where 3 people all go down in a challenge and then Caleb is medically evacuated is one of the most impactful scenes in Survivor. The whole thing is an incredible watch. The way that Carl Jason looks after Sydney, Debbie at the start, you think, oh, it's just Debbie being Debbie. And then when you realise that Caleb is also going down, and then the whole beauty tribe crying as he leaves, after watching this incredible relationship develop between Ty and Caleb, this unlikely pair. Now, I haven't seen Big Brother, but apparently Caleb doesn't come off as well on it. But I did enjoy his presence on the show for the short time he was there, enough that I cared when he left, although he didn't do much when he came back on Game Changers, if anything at all. I do really love the Brawn tribe on this season. I think Scott and Jason are hilarious. I think they're probably the last truly great villains that we had on Survivor. And they're some of my favourite characters we've had in a long time. Sydney is incredible. I don't know how you can talk about this season without talking about Aubrey, Ty, and Michelle, though. They are basically Go Wrong. Ty is such a one-of-a-kind character. He just brings this joy to everything. His relationship with Mark the Chicken is incredible. The fact that he ends up working with Joe and Scott, which is not at all where you'd think he'd be going. And then when they both find the bits of the super idol, and Kyle and Ty are going to put it together to save Scott, and then Scott gets voted out, and then Ty says he's not going to play it. It's just incredible stuff. Really, really, really good. Really solid season of Survivor. Aubrey obviously plays an incredible game, but I must say that I've always believed that Michelle should have won the season. I think it's very clear to see why Aubrey didn't win. I think she hid her game too much from the other people on the island. I think that she didn't have strong enough social connections, and although she was a better strategic force than Michelle, she wasn't leaps and bounds ahead of everyone else. She was still strong enough that she could have won and was a stronger strategic player, but I think Michelle had some things over her. And also Michelle's challenge strength in like the puzzle department, which we'll obviously see again in Winners at War, is great. And I think Debbie as well is a great character on this season. It was the first time we had a truly coach-esque character from a female on the show. Everything she does is pure gold. And that editing trick where her occupation keeps changing because she's done every job under the sun makes me crack up to this day. So at number 9, we have Ko-Rong. At number 8, we have Cambodia's Second Chance. Another fantastic season. This season didn't do loads for me the first time I saw it. I thought it was a tad too game-botty for me. But I've watched it twice since. It's currently the one I'm rewatching, actually. And it's gone up in my estimations so much. I think it's got a perfect cast, other than not having Shane Powers back. I don't know how they pulled that off. But I think it's a fantastic cast. I think it gets better and better as the season goes on, and it starts on a high note. I think Jeff Varner this season, not talking about game changers, is a great character for the time he's there. I think Abby Maria's early game is fantastic to watch. I'm so glad that she didn't change like she said she had. The Terry Dietz situation is heartbreaking to watch. I think Tasha becomes very annoying on this season, as I said earlier. But I think the Witch's Coven as well is very interesting. And Jeremy's winning game is one of the most impressive. I must say that I have loads of love for Stephen Fishback, but this wasn't his best showing, was it? I think it becomes very clear from watching multiple seasons that Stephen and JT sort of know that they need to have each other to do well in the game. I think when they're on their own and left to their own devices, they're not quite the powerhouse that they are together. Joe Anglin has never done loads for me, but his challenge wins in this season are very impressive. When he passes out against Keith. Oh, Keith on his tuk-tuk, even though we don't get much of him. Spencer's obviously got a great character arc in this season where he learns to become less of a robot, I guess. And you have the two big iconic moments. You have Wentworth negating her 9 jury votes. Wentworth will not count, which is still a crazy moment in the season. Because Wentworth meant nothing to people before this season, really. She had a couple of episodes on San Juan del Sur where she didn't really have any memorable moments. And then, straight out of the gate this season, she's finding an idol as a challenge. And then, after the merge, she's idling out Andrew Savage, who was well annoying on this season, in incredible fashion with the most jury votes negated with an idol. It's crazy still to me that this huge majority alliance didn't split their votes. And then Andrew Savage flipping at the bird as he goes out after Cass has come in the same tribal as part of the jury and flipped everyone to bird. It's great. Really great. And then, obviously, we have the no votes tribal as well, which is such an iconic tribal. I think one of Jeff Probst's favourites. He's always so pleased that he whipped out that board to explain what was happening. But yeah, it's just got so many great moments in this season. And it lands here at number 8. Now at number 7, we have a season that's not everyone's cup of tea. But if you like stuff like this, then it's the cream of the crop. And that is Survivor Gabon, Earth's Last Eden. I've talked before about how I like the Gaboni-esque seasons. And this one is the originator. It's such just a crazy, unbelievable series of events. If you were explaining to me what happens on Survivor Gabon, they'd think you were crazy. And it's probably the season where, if anything, strategy regresses. And I couldn't tell you if there was a single great player on the cast of this. I don't think there is. But they're all just pure gold. I could go through every person in this cast and tell you something I like about them. Even the likes of Gillian and her poo. I mean, that's great. GC being elected the leader, and then trying to give it away straight away, and then rowing off on a boat and no one could find him, not even production. Incredible. You've got Ace with his dubious English accent and his relationship with Sugar. I think Sugar is such an incredible narrator of this season. The way she flips on everyone because she just doesn't like them. And then by the end, she gets 0 jury votes. She essentially played the first ever perfect game. She got no jury votes and got no votes in the game. So in some ways. And then you've got Randy, who's obviously just gold. And the crystal of it all, the fact that they got this person who was an Olympic medalist in running, who can't run, and then we find out post-season that she was on all kinds of steroids, I think is hilarious. Bob's not the most interesting winner, but it's always memorable when he makes those fake idols and gives them to Randy. That's a great moment. You've got so many great confessionals. You've got the forget you, go home, goodbye. You've got Randy just saying bitch, because why not? You've got Sugar saying, oh yeah, loser. It's so childish, but it's such a funny season. I just adore everything about it. And my favourite moment of the season is the auction with Cookiegate. It's just almost as if it was written by comedy writers. And I love it. I love it. It's such a breath of fresh air amongst all the other Survivor seasons. It's completely different to everything else. And it's such a gorgeous location as well. It helps that this was the first season shot in HD. But I think it was a great place anyway. The fact that they've got just those elephants walking about when Ace is doing his confessional always makes me happy. And then for number 6, we've got a season that I sort of see as modern day Gabon, but with some strategy as well. And this would probably be around the late 30s spots, maybe even bottom of the list for most people. But for me, at number 6, I have Survivor Edge of Extinction. I love Edge of Extinction. I think this is such a good season. And I get it. I do get it. The final 3 is probably the worst final 3 Survivor's ever had. One of them hasn't played the game for the majority of the game and then ends up winning. And 2 of them I could tell you nothing about in Gavin and Julie. But I think when you look back at the season, knowing the outcome, Chris played the game he was playing this season. In this season, it was completely allowed to go to the edge and come back and win. And I think that the rounds that he did play, especially when he came back, he played so optimally. I don't think there was anything that he could have done more than what he did when he came back. Taking Rick into fire making is still such a ballsy, great move. And the fact that he wins that and sends home the biggest jury threat on the board that would have beaten anyone at the end is fantastic. And seeing the round of applause that Rick Devens has as he leaves. Talking of Rick Devens, I know he's a really love or hate character, and he's another one of those characters where your opinion on Russell really ultimately is your opinion, not Russell, on Rick, is really ultimately your opinion on the season as a whole. But luckily, I think Rick Devens is one of the best Survivor characters of all time. From his introduction, talking about being the Kool-Aid man bursting through the wall, and that's basically what he is for the rest of the season. All of his news updates are fantastic, and he is a showman. I don't think he's particularly the best player ever. I think lots of his big moves, like making the fake idols, don't really do anything to progress his game strategically. But what they do is make a show in front of the jury and make the jury remember him and enjoy him and impressed by what he can do. And seeing him win that first Edge returning duel, I just think that he is pure gold in front of the camera. And he may have been trained in it for years, but he knows what he's doing. I think there are some nice side characters on the season as well, in like Victoria. I think Aurora's always got an underrated story. I think Ron Clark is great on this season. But I think most of the big characters come from the Manu tribe. You do obviously have Aubrey and Joe over on Karma, but it's not their biggest seasons, and they get voted out as soon as they can. But David and Kelly Wentworth really make the most of their returning appearances on this season. I think this is David's best season. I think it's so impressive how he manages to integrate himself as if he's almost not a returning player. And Kelly Wentworth has such dominance as usual. I think both of them are at their most likable in this season, especially David, and this is where he really solidified himself to me as one of the legends of the game. I think War Dog is hilarious in this season. He's so strategically powerful at the start. He basically controls every single vote at the start of the game. But how you can be called War Dog and be so terrible at challenges just baffles me. Obviously, you've got Reem. Other than Zay Knight, my favourite first boot. In it the whole season, of course, because of the Edge. And unbelievable how the first boot of the season has more screen time than probably half of the rest of the cast. But it's such well-deserved screen time. I must confess, though, that I've never been a massive fan of Big Wendy. I feel like she's trying to play for the Sia vote, and she's sort of trying to do a tie thing, and it's never really worked for me. But outside of Big Wendy, this is a season I can really, really get behind. It's one of my favourites. And I think if you haven't seen it for a while, it's worth a rewatch. So now into my top 5. And if you haven't worked it out already, 3 out of my top 5 are returnee seasons. But at 5, we have a newbie season with Survivor Tocantins, the Brazilian Highlands. What an incredible season. Tocantins, I think, is the Survivor season I've seen the most times. I think I've seen it about 9 times now. Something like that, which is obscene. Just because I think Coach on this season is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best casting find that the Survivor producers have ever found. I don't know how they found Coach. It was like finding gold. Every single thing that man says is perfection. His use of quotes that he's obviously memorized before the island, that we've had confirmed, is hilarious. When he's talking about his story of going down the Amazon and the tribe trying to eat his ass, but he had to keep it PG. And then him using the lie detector test at the end at the reunion show, and it being proven that everything he said was the truth. It's crazy. Now, I don't know if that's just Coach sort of believes it's the truth or managed to pass the lie detector test, but whatever it was is incredible. And without a shadow of a doubt, my favourite moment in all of Survivor is him on Exile Island. Immeasurable, immovable, invincible. It's just so cinematic and presented to us like Coach's Jesus. And I can't do it justice, but my God, is it a hell of a scene. Now, I could talk about Coach for maybe the whole podcast if I wanted, but I have to talk about the rest of the season. The one reason it's not at number 1 for me is that I think all of the pre-merge boots are quite boring and don't do much for me at all. But that's fine, because we don't get to meet any of them anyway. We just spend all our time with Coach. JT is obviously such a good winner in this season. The first real perfect game, that is. He got no votes in the game and got every vote at the end of the game. The only person who's done that since is John Cochran. In 47, if we count the currently airing seasons of Survivor, we've only had 2 perfect winners, which I find such an impressive feat. But JT is so likeable in this season, plays such a good game, basically gets a whole cast of people to fall on their swords for him in incredible fashion. And Steven as well. If JT wasn't on this season, I think Steven would be one of the best winners of all time. He is so savvy. That challenge where he is right at the back and then they have to remember all the numbers and do this equation. He remembers every number in one go because he knows the human brain can remember 7 numbers in one go. And he changes each plus sign or minus sign into a 1 to 4. Genius stuff. He's so impressive this season. It's a shame he had such a poor final tribal performance because he couldn't have won anyway, but it would have been nice to have seen him go out in good fashion. I think Erin and Taj are both underrated characters on this season. I think Debbie has her moments as well, and I love Sierra Reed as side characters. I think Sierra and Brendan's story together, Brendan being the dragon, the Dragon Slayer, is really interesting. I don't know why Sierra gets so much hate. I don't know what she did to elicit that, but they all seem to despise her. Bless her. And then, obviously, we have Tyson Apostle, who comes back to win the game seasons later. But I think this is his most fun appearance. He's just so likeable in such a snarky way. And him being assistant coach is hilarious to me. I love the challenge where he's up on the big pole. You know the one I mean. And he's talking about how pretty he is. I think everything he says, if Coach wasn't there, he'd be a top-tier character on that season. He is a top-tier character on that season, but he'd be the best of the season. But the big 4 in Coach, Tyson, JT, and Steven just make this season stand out as one of the best to me. And for that, it lands here at 5. Now, these top 4 for me are very much interchangeable. If you ask me on a different day, these could be in a different order. But these are, without a shadow of a doubt, my 4 favourite seasons of Survivor. But for today, I've decided, at number 4, to have Winners at War. Now, there are some very basic reasons why Winners at War isn't my top season. And that's got a lot to do with the boot list. We lose lots of the old schoolers right out the gate, people who are more legends of the game. But that allows some of the newer players to become legends in their own right, which is lovely to watch. I also would usually have a problem with Edge of Extinction being in play, but I think it really helps this season, actually. It means that even though we lose figures like Tyson and Rob early, they don't leave our screens, and it's nice to see them. And that scene with the family reward, where they all get to see their family, even the people on the edge, and it's all their children as well. If we didn't have them there, that wouldn't hold such a gut punch. But that is one season that makes me teary-eyed every time I watch it. I think it's so special seeing who the real people are behind these people that we see on our screens all the times. All the time. But my main issue is with the fire tokens. But again, there's a plus side to the fire tokens, in that without the fire tokens, we wouldn't have had the, oh my god, this is extortion scene from Tony, which is one of the funniest, most impressive scenes ever in Survivor. I think that whole episode for Tony is arguably the best single episode showing of a player ever. He has the extortion advantage played against him by Natalie. Then he manages to get enough fire tokens to get rid of the advantage, which is incredible social play. The social capital that Tony Vlachos was allowed to have in that game is unfathomable, really. Then he wins an immunity challenge, and then he manages to get rid of Sophie, who's the biggest threat in the game at this point. His game is undeniably one of to some, the best winning game in Survivor history here. And as much as I love Sandra Diaz Twine and think it's incredibly impressive that she's won twice, I think you'd be a fool to say that Tony's 2 wins aren't vastly more impressive than Sandra's 2 wins. And he is truly the king of Survivor here. The spy nest is such a natural evolution of the spy bunker, and is perfect. When he sees Natalie showing Sarah her idol, that's fantastic stuff. The amount of challenge wins he has after having none on his previous 2 seasons is crazy. Everything Tony does this season is perfect. The way he plays an undercover low-key game at the start and manages to get people on side, and then he can start pulling off bigger moves. The fact that he gets rid of Sophie annoys Sarah so much, and then like a day later they're working together again. The fire making against Sarah is so heart-wrenching. This journey you've watched Cops R Us go on over 3 seasons, where that alliance is 3 for 3. Between both of them, every season they've both appeared on, one of them has won, which is crazy. But seeing him have to send Sarah home and truly feel heartbroken about it and really upset is hard to watch and incredible to watch at the same time. Tony is just such a masterclass this season. Him singing Baby Shark, him making his stupid tall ladder. It's all great stuff. I think it's great to see Boston Rob back again, trying his old tricks of the buddy system, but this time trying it on winners, which is obviously not going to go down very well, but it's his last resort. Seeing the old schoolers come together to form an alliance at the start, seeing Rob and Parvati make an alliance together, and Parvati's great again. It is really sad that Sandra raises the sail at edge of extinction, and that's how her story has to end. I mean, I say that, she might be back again for 50. But it completely makes sense with her character. We knew she wasn't going to come back into the game. So it's a nice, fitting send-off for Sandra in the game. And the way she's sent home really bolsters Denise to me. Denise getting an extra fire token, essentially, out of the deal, and then getting an extra idol from the deal, and voting out the queen of the game is really impressive. You've got Yule back on our screens after this many seasons. Incredible to see him back. I like having Wendell become a villain this season. I think Adam Klein really shines this season. He's hilarious when he's talking about Boston Rob and Amber's marriage. That's phenomenal. And when he tries to play the podium at Final Tribal, which I completely get, it's being done on international seasons, which is hilarious because they try and make him look like a fool. I'm surprised they haven't actually made that a real thing since he tried that. But what a funny moment. When he says it was worth a shot, and Jeff says, always, really sincerely, it really touches me every time I watch it. I think it's such a lovely, lovely season, and truly does feel like a conclusion for so many of these people's arcs. And it's a very emotional season as well. It holds a lot of gravitas and weight. And for that reason, Winners at War lands at number 4. And at number 3, I've got another massively iconic and popular season in Survivor Micronesia Fans versus Favourites. I don't think they could have put together a better cast of favourites if they tried for this season, with the limitations that they had. It's just an all-around perfect cast. The newbies, though some of them may be recruits, really hold their weight this season, as opposed to Caramoan. Eric, obviously, has such a great story. It's incredible seeing him talk at the start about being someone that could stand up to Ozzy in competitions, and him proving that, and then him becoming Ozzy's little super fan who follows him about. I love. And then obviously he has the whole scene where he gives up his immunity, which is one of if not the most iconic scenes in Survivor history. It doesn't matter how many times you see that scene, it's still fantastic. The way that they show every vote as well at the end, only time that I think that they've ever done that. Fascinating. And every time he says, "Those are the most boobies I've ever seen in my life," gets me cackling. We love Eric. But there were loads of other great people on the fans tribe of this season. We've got Joel, who is hilarious when he's pulling Chet around in that one challenge. And then Chet says, "Oh, you hit my head back there." And he says, "I don't care." And Chet says, "I know." I think that's really funny every time I see it. We've got Tracy on the fans tribe, who's a great presence this season. Obviously, Natalie Bolton has a great run at the end. Her saying that she's going to use people's jugulars as dental floss. She has some great moments in that last couple of episodes. Why are you tripping? I think they've got a really strong group of fans there. And then the favourites are perfect. The fact that Johnny Fairplay gave us so much in one episode is incredible. Him running on just as Jeff Probst is so iconic. You've got Sari, who obviously plays such a good game this season. She becomes like a villain. And I think if it was a final three, she probably wins this game. Parvati obviously does play, though, an exceptional winning game this season. She's so charming, but so maniacal. Amanda's also incredibly impressive when she plays that idol that we didn't know she had. It's just great. Ozzy confessing his love to Amanda at Final Tribal, only to have cheated on her by the time of the reunion. Hilarious. And Ozzy this whole season is great. He's such a switch from what he was on Cook Islands. That season he was seen as like a god and like this Jesus figure, and he is this season. But we understand how it's like arrogance, and he's not actually this like omnipotent person. And he's a bit of a willy in real life. He's just hilarious this season, and his blind side is great. And then how can we talk this long and not talk about the "it's a fucking stick" moment? How iconic is that? Eliza is the queen of jury reactions. Everything she does is great. But yeah, we've got the Penna and the James medevacs as well, which are... Well, the James one sort of comes out of nowhere, but the Penna one is incredibly heart-wrenching. You can see how much he really does care about this game and love it. And it's just a season with episode after episode of great television. And that's why it lands here at number 3. But now at number 2, shocking some people probably that it's not my number 1, I do have Survivor Heroes versus Villains. I mean, without a shadow of a doubt, this is the most iconic season of Survivor ever. I think this is the best cast Survivor has ever put together. And I know I've said lots of others are great casts as well, but I do genuinely believe this is the best cast they could have put together over these 20 seasons. There's not a single bad person on this cast. I'm looking at it currently thinking, yeah, there's no one here I didn't want to see again. You've got Rupert on the season, starting with some of the lesser people. Not generally, Rupert's like a god of the game, but on this season, you've got Rupert who has some great moments. Him tricking Russell into thinking he's got an idol in his pocket by putting a rock in his pocket is like weirdly ingenious. You've got the Colby story of him coming back to the game after all these years and being this grumpy curmudgeon and giving up his game multiple times and being really arsey with Jeff Probst about having a bite of chocolate for some reason. And then by the end of the game, he decides he's going to try and play again for like an episode for no reason. And it's great. I even like watching Danielle Di Lorenzo on this season, and her alliance with Russell and Parvati is really interesting to me. Courtney Yates has some hilarious moments. Coach doesn't stop having hilarious moments. My favourite thing in the whole season is when Tyson's telling me what everyone's problems with him are. When he's saying, "Oh, don't wear your feathers in your ear at Tribal. Don't do your dragon chi on the beach. People mock you. It's great. Don't tell your stories. No one believes you." It's just a perfect season. It's so impressive. Tom Westman saying, "Tomorrow we make our apologies, tonight we make our move." I mean, that could have been written by an Oscar-winning writer. It's perfect. And then, obviously, we have the final three in Russell, Parvati, and Sandra. Sandra this season is so much fun to watch. When she comes on at the start and she said, "Last time I was mean, this time I'm meaner." Fantastic. When she says she'll make up a good lie. When she throws Russell's hat onto the fire, that's a great moment. When she says, "I don't know about that," that's a great moment. Everything Sandra does is gold this season, and it may not be the most impressive game, but by the end you completely understand why she won. There's no question in your mind as to why Sandra won this game. Parvati, who I think should have been the winner of this season, plays such an impressive game this season. Her manoeuvring with Russell, her double idol play, everything that she does is so excellently done. And Russell, again, is the star of this season. And I don't have a problem with that, because I think he brings so much gold. JT, we should have talked about JT's downfall. JT giving him that letter, telling him he's gonna get the idol because he thinks there's an all-women's alliance that's devouring him, is such an iconic moment. And then JT getting voted out, and Parvati playing two idols. Oh my god. There's just not a moment in this season that you don't remember. And it's so much fun. And if it wasn't for one more season, I would say it was the best season in the history of Survivor. I mean, ask me tomorrow and I might say it's the best season in the history of Survivor. But for now, at number 1, we have Survivor David versus Goliath. What a great season. What a great newbie season. The fact that this season holds up against these other seasons and it's got no returnees is mind-boggling, really. Again, this is a season with no duds on the cast. You've got... well, I'm not really that into Lisa. Don't tell anyone. But other than that, what a great season. There are so many iconic moments. Most of them just from Angelina. You could get a list of Angelina's most iconic moments in this season. You've got her climbing up that ladder and saying she almost died. You've got her doing the rice negotiation. You've got her asking Natalie for a jacket. You've got her asking Dan for his idol. Everything she does is hilarious. Christian is obviously the breakout star of the season. He's just such an interesting character. He's like if you put the Cochrane stereotype on steroids. He's so intelligent, so likable. The way that he's able to hang out with everyone, even like the brochachos, is hilarious. And talking about the brochachos, John Hennigan, what a lovely bloke. And Dan Venkerin, he's hilarious. The way that he gets idol nullified out of the game, and when Carl says ding, what a master stroke there. Also, the master stroke of Davey playing his idol on Christian, and then the Minority Alliance splitting their votes for the first time. Wow. Even Gabby, you think she's going to just be like a follower, and she even tries to flip on Christian by the end of the season, really bolstering my opinion of her. Mike White plays such an incredible game. Drunk Mike White in that finale episode is like my spirit animal. I love him. But yeah, there are just so many moments in this season that bring me so much joy. And for that reason, it is my favourite season of Survivor. So thank you so much for joining me for 2 hours as I talk about my favourite seasons of my favourite programme. Well, most of the seasons of my favourite programme. And I hope that you will join me as our journey continues. Thank you.